Core values of primary research: context and motive, local rules and enforcement, validation of signals and removing false positives, access to non-public behavioural data, re revealing hidden opportunities, and but most importantly here is that is well, critical is the ability to find out information, often hard information that is not in the public arena. Types of primary research, so expert interviews, distributor and channel checks, mystery shopping. So these are some of the key ones that we would use as a a competitive intelligence company. Um, uh, some of the regulatory stakeholder interviews, etc. Some which are in slightly other fields, things like ethnography, customer surveys, IDIs, and focus groups, which would is more sort of pure market research and focused on customers. But we certainly do in-depth customer research for B2B clients to understand customer motivations, etc. And that's a really um, critical value of primary research. Roles of AI. Um, so how can AI help you and speed things up in the process of doing human research, primary research? So there's questionnaire and discussion guide support. AI is really good for um, creating um, templates for discussion guides and for questionnaires, as long as you make sure you're really thinking it through, changing it, developing it from there. Transcription is a fantastic tool, and it was coming in before AI, but has been further improved by AI. Summarization is extremely useful. Again, with some caveats, you need to if you're looking at a very high level expert or market participant interview, you want to be really questioning and checking the summarization and not just taking it for granted that that's covered. Synthetic persona interviews are a really interesting area. I was at a conference recently where people were saying that they'd done a research project and they'd fulfilled a large part of their quota or their target. But there were a couple of um, target respondents that they just hadn't been able to get, and that they had created synthetic personas and utilized their responses with caveats. I think it's still very much a kind of open debate about the legitimacy of that. But it's certainly one of the kind of hot topics um, in this melding of AI and primary research. Text analysis, theme extraction from interviews. So I'll talk more about this kind of thing um, in a later slide. But yeah, there's that's an important opportunity as well. Matching respondents and profiling, so helping you to find the respondents in the first place, which I think is an area of real growth. Not something that we've actually done that much of yet, but I think that's a huge opportunity for AI to get more and more involved in recruitment, and there are companies moving forward with that. Um, Caveats: AI clearly needs prompt engineering and human oversight. So AI can't interview a frustrated distributor, uncover a competitor's internal delays, observe real buying behavior, assess tone, confidence, hesitation, or intent. So I think one of the things that I think we probably all recognize with AI is that it tends to be a little bit uh, over optimistic, a little bit ideal world. Um, uh, it doesn't tend to highlight uh, the drawbacks or the day-to-day frustrations, the real world problems that people encounter. It's more the kind of theoretical, it'll tend to be more kind of the theoretical possibilities and opportunities rather than the day-to-day um, realities of a business. And that's a particular thing that that really comes out in primary research. So just a little talk through of uh, um, how we would use AI in a primary research process. Um, Define critical intelligence questions and scope with the client. Most of this will come from us, from the client, but it's never does any harm to use AI to do blue, for ask for blue sky ideas and see whether it comes up with anything that you haven't thought of. Respondent sourcing and screening, avoiding professional takers. As I said, I think that is a growth opportunity, but it's something that I can't really talk too much because we haven't really got going on doing that yet. Multi-method framework fieldwork. So the transcription and summarization, potentially saves us maybe 25 to 30% of the time for an interview, and gives us the capacity to do more faster and cheaper. Um, Triangulation and analyst validation. So what we do, and this is a fairly new thing, but it's something that we're experimenting with and getting really good results is we use what we refer to as a sort of ingestion folder. So essentially, in the same way as traditionally on a research project, you would have folders on a server where you drop everything, right? You drop all the useful secondary, you drop all the useful primary, you drop PDF documents, you drop web pages, you drop company presentations, you drop filings, all into a folder. In fact, you'd probably have subfolders for different things to keep it organized. What we're doing now is we're doing that, but we're doing that with an ingestion tool. So what we're experimenting with Notebook LLM, and then we're coming on to question to interrogate that folder, specifically kind of um, highlighted and forefronted in our questioning through an AI model. And I'll show a little bit more about what that means in practice in an example that I'll show in the next slide. And then in terms of delivery, there are a whole number of tools that you can use to design and present your content better. We use Canva for conceptual graphics, and you can use Power BI for data particularly. So just to give an example of what that meant in a real project, this was pretty text heavy, so I wouldn't bother trying to read it, but I'll just um, uh, talk through it. So we had a client which was a leading tobacco company, FMCG major, that sought to optimize its integrated facility management strategy across 26 manufacturing sites. So it was looking at like how could it already outsourced a lot of facility management, but what was its strategy? Should it have one supplier globally? Should it have multiple local suppliers? Should it have specialist suppliers globally in one element of facilities management? All these kind of things are models that different companies adopt, and it wanted to really speak to um, facilities management suppliers and its peers who were using these services to understand how these trends were changing, what best practice looked like, etc. So it's a pretty typical subject for us. I think we did about 25 interviews across the different domains, spoke to all the biggest facility managers, most of the biggest FMCGs on what they were doing in this area. Um, but how did this change when we were using AI? So we would normally start a project with a period of orientation, so reading of journals, reports, blogs, everything that we could around the market. You know, we have subscriptions to a lot of generalist magazines, to things like Factiva, where we can pick up all the main business um, journals, etc. So we did that again, but this time we were dropping everything that we were finding into the ingest folder instead of just making a note of it within the sourcing folder. Um, it's also very useful for early questions within a project. So when I talked earlier about sort of niche and super niche topics, the truth is that we don't, our head of FMCG who was covering this didn't know everything about facilities management. So there were kind of some real kind of basic, in a sense, basic but kind of structural questions to really understand how this worked. AI is very good at answering those kind of questions. Um, Primary research, how did it help? As I said before, main aid was just with transcription and summation tools. I think we probably used the AI to help us draft the first version of the questionnaire, but I think it probably changed so much with to and fro with the client that was fairly marginal by the time we actually started the project. Um, uh, Participation in forums and events. So pulling all these presentations, transcripts, everything we can into this kind of central repository. All the secondary research that we would normally do goes into the ingest folder, case studies, benchmarking data, industry reports, etc. So, and then all the call summaries and transcriptions. So then we had this tool that we could um, query and utilize as we were starting to try and answer our key intelligence questions. And so we would um, utilize that AI tool to query it and get responses specific to pulling, looking that would utilize the data from within the folder first and then fall back on broader web search, um, validated to that data so we could find, where it was. And that allowed us to, it speeded up the process of pulling stuff together, whether it's as simple as, oh, I remember reading that somewhere, but I can't remember where it was. Simple query in across the ingestion folder finds it in seconds rather than spending minutes searching through. To ideas that it's pulling together across a company filing, some data, and some interview content. So it's a very powerful tool. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't pretend that we're at the end point of expertise in doing that, but it's something that we've started using in our projects, and we think it's got great uh, potential. So we delivered the final product, benchmarking, supplier analysis, cost benefit assessment, efficient strategies that we were suggesting. There was a lot of emphasis on recommendations, etc., in this project, as there generally is with these kind of projects. Um, and how did AI help us deliver it? So we utilized a lot of the information that we queried from the ingest folder. We actually got it to create draft reports and compared them. We didn't actually use one of those draft reports, but we pulled out content from it. Um, we went back to the ingest folder with the initial intelligence questions to get its more developed response. Um, and we queried the ingest where there were questions that we had outstanding. We queried the ingest to see whether it could answer them. There you have to be, I think this is an area where you have to be particularly careful with AI because it tends to try to answer things even when it doesn't know. So you have to be very alert to, and that's where you get a lot of the issues. I've forgotten the technical term for it, sort of data mirages. Um, uh, we so in the end, for most of those, we ended up going back to respondents to try and clarify them. But it's worth trying through these tools. And the output was very successful. You probably expect me to say that, but the client was very happy after we'd worked through it with them with some iterations, and then they subsequently actually recommended us to a number of other companies. Soumya, are there any chat questions that we should respond to, or does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Oliver, we have two questions. One question is from Yogesh. So he asks, which AI tools have you tried to create and query on ingest folder?
So we've only used this notebook LLM so far, but there are others, and we will be trying them out. I mean, I can give you recommendations, but frankly, if you put into Copilot or whatever, ask for competitors to Notebook LLM, it will give you a series of good ones, or ones that seem to be relevant. And as we haven't tried them out yet, I couldn't really distinguish between them. But Notebook LLM is the one that we've used, and we found it good, but not perfect. So I think we will potentially be trying others. But it may also be that our utilization wasn't quite right. So we're not. So we're going to persist with Notebook LLM until we're confident that we've got our processes are optimized, and then we might look at other companies.
Okay, Oliver, there's one other question from Nisha. She asks, what AI tools would you recommend for both secondary and primary research?
So, um, sorry, I'm having a bad day with my memory. What's the main secondary research AI that we use is it's not ChatGPT, it's not Copilot, it's uh, uh, I'll come back on that in a second. Is the other really big one, Perplexity? Yeah, it's Perplexity AI is the primary one that we use for secondary. We think in our experience, is the most up to date and best one for standard research queries. And then on primary, I think they're all good for things like transcription and summarization. And then, as I said, for this kind of ingest process, we've tried Notebook LLM, but I couldn't necessarily confirm that that's the best one. A quick reminder on uh, some of the ongoing challenges with primary. I've been advocating, expert interviews, participant interviews very strongly in this presentation, but there are challenges. Finding critical respondents is obviously slow, expensive, difficult. You have to be really determined. You have to be skilled at it. We get training from the Institute for Competitive Intelligence, or we have had training from them and from the Institute of Market Research. Um, you need to develop a skill set to do it well. Clearly, it sets back you can't get very quick responses on it. And this may be where some of those synthetic respondent things might come in if people are comfortable with that, it will obviously give much faster results. Um, uh, there are legal issues. I mean, I was quite surprised at a conference in Europe recently that most of the in-house research team said that they didn't do any competitor interviewing and limited customer interviewing. They appreciated that using agencies mitigated some of the legal issues, but they, not, that they would still have to think about it and work closely with the provider, they said. But they certainly wouldn't do it in-house because even if you're not looking for confidential information, the fact that you might get it is potentially an issue. But that is a regional thing. I don't think companies in Asia and the rest of the world have those same um, face those same issues. I think, frankly, that smaller and medium-sized companies probably are less sensitive to it, but very large companies with very strong compliance departments are very careful about it. And then obviously you've still got to get people internally to adopt the insights that you've created. Respondent vetting, recording, triangulation, consent, IP protection. So you've got to make sure that if you're quoting people, etc., you've got their consent, compliance. Um, you've got to tell people when you're recording, tell people when you're using AI. Um, yeah, so all these things, the primary is not one to just jump straight into. Um, and, I think there are clear advantages with using outhouse providers if they're really good at it and if they give you the full insight into what they're into who they're speaking to and what they're discovering so that you can really get the full nuance out of it because a lot of the value is in the nuance. So when we present our findings, we present all our findings, but you know, often we find that half the value is in the transcriptions and summaries that we send the clients, where they find other things that really click with them that we wouldn't necessarily have known are important from their perspective. So yeah, I think this has got the wrong title, but it's really the process for an in-house of approaching CI from an in-house perspective. So understanding regulatory constraints. So the first thing is to understand the regulatory constraints and what you can do and can't do. Second thing is to understand what the big questions are that you need to answer, that you want to know as an organization. Third thing is to create a sponsor in the leadership so it has visibility and it has backing and it has money because it needs time and money. Conduct your initial research. I would suggest using an agency at that stage, unless you've got experienced people. But even, and for the advantages of that, you're likely to get clearer and less biased responses. Then set up continuous market and competitor monitoring. I think you can use an agency for this, but it can also be done very effectively in-house, using a range of tools, and then try and institutionalize the outputs and make and as we were talking about, ensure that they're being absorbed across the organization. Particularly, show not tell is if you can get them integrated into tools like CRMs, etc., so that they're actually there in front of people, in front of the sales team, when they're in their day-to-day processes.